Okay, hey everyone. Welcome back to a boy episode of The Field Between. My name is Ahmed.
And I'm Yasmin.
And boy, oh boy, do we have an episode today. We're going to be talking about AI. And, well, that's all the boy topics I got.
That's pretty boy, though. That's good. How are we before we get into it?
I'm fine. I am just found out that I was mined for content. Some guy asked me what my favorite book on the street. Some guy on the street asked me what my favorite book was when I was walking home the other day.
And you didn't realize he was recording?
I mean, I knew he was recording, but I was like, what are the odds that this is like a guy who people know or whatever?
Yeah.
It's probably just like some guy trying to start his Instagram account. Like he had someone filming, but it wasn't like a crazy camera or anything like that.
I always wondered if like those on the street interviews, they have to get your permission. I guess not. I guess if you answer, that's space, permission.
Yeah. Anyway, he asked me and I was just kind of like walking by and I kind of didn't really stop to even talk to him, but I just said Moby Dick. It's the first thing that came to mind. And then a friend of mine just messaged me and was like, hey.
Who?
He's a friend of mine who's now in Saudi.
Oh, that's so random.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And he's like, oh, dude.
Not even in the U.S.
He was like, oh, this was fun to wake up to for Fajr.
Oh, my God.
And he was just like, we just kind of like caught up a little bit.
That's cute.
But that's how I found out.
That's such a funny way to find out.
But this account has like 500,000 followers. And everyone's commenting about how I haven't actually read Moby Dick.
Really?
Yeah, they're being mean in the comments. They're being very mean.
They don't know you.
Yeah.
I looked at the comments. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
You probably had to go pretty far down. I feel like most of them were.
Not that far down.
Really?
No, yeah.
Well, you look like a cutie.
I doubt it.
Good on you for answering. I wouldn't have stopped.
These people clearly have never spent hours trying to look for pictures of decapitated sperm whales on the side of a ship.
It's true.
A whaling ship.
They're not on your level, baby.
No.
Yeah. Do you tell them?
Yeah.
Should do a response reel.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm a book defluencer. Apparently, I'm just trying to get people to stop reading Moby Dick. Anyway, what else is going on?
We are kind of in a bit of a travel season. You were in Philly last week for, what was it? Like 4 nights? Is that right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
4 nights, 3 days for a work trip. But I know you had some fun while you were there. We really love that city.
Yeah.
And then I was in Oregon, in Ashland, with a good friend, which was fun. I want to go to Bend next. That's supposed to be really beautiful in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now we're back. We're doing our thing. And then we're going to a wedding this weekend in North Carolina, which we're really looking forward to, a good friend. And then we're going back to Pittsburgh for just a day. So we're not going to see anyone. We apologize in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And we are seeing 5 houses in the hopes of landing one and not having to go back to the East Coast the rest of our time here.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about a couple of them. So inshallah, fingers crossed. I feel like we've learned a lot through the process, and like these are all closer to our price range, and so hopefully we'll see.
Inshallah.
Yeah. But yeah, basically kind of busy. I finally got past a big deadline. I think I can share what it is, right?
Unless you don't want someone to give you the evil eye.
That's true. I won't get too specific, but my book is 6 chapters and I've drafted 3. So that feels good.
It's a good milestone.
It's a good milestone. Yeah. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. So I'm like kind of halfway there, though I will say one of the chapters is a little anemic, but yeah, it feels good to be making progress. I kind of took today off. I'm going to get back to it tomorrow. I've moved my deadline for complete book completion to end of September, so I kind of need like a new work plan. Ahmed's shaking his head, but we got to adjust sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are kind of all of our updates, I think.
Cool. We're at war again. But were we really ever not at war is the question. I think most people could have seen the US's treacherous scheme from a mile away.
I mean, it's just a mess. Yeah, the whole thing's a mess. There feels like very little finesse to it, especially on our end.
But there is good news.
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham is dead. Compromised to a permanent end. He's no more.
It's not necessarily good news.
It's great news.
But I don't.
You're right. It's the best news.
I don't celebrate death, but he was not a good man.
I'll dance on his grave if I knew where it was.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be somewhere in South Carolina.
Yeah. Oh yeah, true.
Quite a warmonger.
Or in Israel, probably. I don't know.
Quite a warmonger. His policies won't be missed.
Neither will he as a man.
Yeah.
Right?
If we're doing other like updates, I don't want to get into this too much because it's kind of too sad and awful to kind of blip by, and you've got a really great, exciting episode planned for us, but just kind of an acknowledgement.
Well, don't oversell it.
Well, two more men killed by ICE, which is really awful. Both fathers, one in Maine, one in Houston. Yeah, don't have a lot else to say about that.
Really?
Really, that I don't have much else to say about it.
Are we just reporting the news?
I guess so.
Okay.
I feel like we should acknowledge it that things aren't normal and that it's really
no,
awful.
It's definitely not normal. I mean, it is. The Trump administration came out and was like, "Oh, you guys need to not do the car murders anymore. Let's not do that as a tactic," which it clearly just signals that he's not worried about people being shot by this secret police that he's put together. He's wants it to not be an issue in time for the midterms.
Yeah, it's a terrifying normalization. It's really crazy to live through how quickly. I mean, it's always been normalized for the police to kill Americans, especially Black Americans, but that there is now also this extra paramilitary force that's executing people is like frankly terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rahm Emanuel was just in Israel. And I guess I didn't know this until recently, but apparently he's also one of the 2028 presidential hopefuls. And I haven't really heard what he's got to say on ICE, again, because I don't really think Democrats are talking about it much because, I mean, they kind of opened the door for this shit.
I kind of forgot he existed. I feel like people never die in politics. They just resurface.
That's true.
Like he really fell off the map after he did such a bad job being mayor of Chicago. And then I totally forgot about him.
He was Obama's chief of staff.
Yeah, but that was like a while ago now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So he's thinking about running.
Uh-huh.
I mean, his family is all Zionists. He loves Israel. I think I'd heard somewhere that his father was an IDF soldier or in the IDF in some capacity. So he goes to Israel and does an interview in which he just harshly criticizes what's going on. And he's telling them straight up like it is, whoever's interviewing him, I can't remember the news channel, but he's saying, like, you've lost the U.S., like what you've done is blah, 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 blah. Like
that's surprising.
He's not just saying Netanyahu. I think he like explicitly is like, hey, it's not just Netanyahu, but like the way that you have comported yourselves or whatever overseas and all this is like people are disgusted by it. And interesting strategy. But just given that it's Rahm Emanuel, I cannot help but see this as a sign that the Democrats have finally had enough time to figure out how they are going to talk out of both sides of their mouth and say, shame on you, but we're still going to support you in myriad ways. And a lot of politicians on the left or Democrats are now saying, I'm not going to take money from AIPAC, and AIPAC is poisonous now, and they don't want to talk about it. But there is reporting that seems to show that a lot of AIPAC, first of all, AIPAC has spent more money in this cycle than it has ever before. So the spending is just going up. And there's also some speculation and reporting that they are laundering or kind of cleaning the money through shell packs that are just like named something like, Democratic, United Democratic Society, whatever. I don't remember, but something that doesn't seem related to APAC, but it's APAC dollars. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't really have any. I mean, yeah, I don't like him because I remember him doing a bad job as a mayor. And I remember like a lot of his policies didn't seem to be working very well. Yeah, I think you're right. I honestly think that there's more of like a range of nuance, and I think that in of itself is sort of new and interesting in like how people are dealing with the Israel question, because it used to be like such a fringe anomaly for Democrats to be even a little bit critical of Israel. And now I think we see a pretty large spectrum, honestly. And I think that like the goal is to keep on pushing everyone further on the issue. I think someone like this guy probably would have been like adamantly pro-Israel, and now like he's been shifted to be like, you got to fix stuff, right? And other people have been shifted further to co-sign BDS as a platform or that kind of thing. Obviously, that's still not most Democrats, but yeah, I mean, I do think that there is some hope in it, actually. I mean, I'm not saying like he's anti-Zionist. I definitely wouldn't go that far. But yeah, I think that there is movement.
Oh, he's definitely not anti-Zionist. I want to correct what I said about his father. He was not merely a member of the IDF. He was a member of a terrorist organization. He was in the Irgun, which is like the paramilitary organization that just like terrorized people in mandatory Palestine.
Gotcha.
So that's the family he comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll see.
That's who fucking Obama picked as his chief of staff. That is incredible.
I mean, the issue is that he's a Zionist. Like, you're not totally like liable for your family's crimes. But yeah, the issue is that he like defended that.
Who? Obama? What?
No, Emmanuel.
He's definitely a Zionist.
Yeah. But I'm saying if it had just been that his dad did that and then he renounced it, that wouldn't be an issue. But the fact that he did not, yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Sins of the father and whatnot.
I mean, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
We want generational change.
Yeah. He was a civilian volunteer, assisted Israeli defense forces in the 1991 Gulf War, helping to repair truck brakes in one of Israel's northern bases.
Yeah, we'll see. But I do think that like there are more Democrats that are being pushed on this issue, which I think is great. And I think that it's a minority of the party, but I think that there is like a growing democratic socialist movement that like, in order to be part of that movement, it should be a baseline that you are, for example, co-signing the BDS platform.
Yeah. And I think it's not enough to, the other thing that I think people can talk out of both sides of their mouth about now is saying that I don't think that we should continue funding Israel. So this is another litmus test thing that they didn't want to play along with, but now I think they've had enough time to figure out how they can talk around it. And even Israel, a couple weeks ago, or maybe last month, Netanyahu came out, did a presser, and was just like, I don't want the U.S. to continue giving foreign aid to Israel. Israel can actually fend for itself in that regard. What they want is like a very close military partnership where we share like intelligence and...
But I mean, at that point, we're still giving them weapons. That's the whole issue.
Yeah, of course.
Right. No, you're right. I'm sure there are some Democrats that are trying to be kind of skeevy and saying like, oh, like we should stop giving foreign aid, but then would like still sign off on like weapons. But I think a lot of people, no, I'm sure actually a lot of people are parsing the lines, but I do think some people, when they say like, I mean, when I should be more precise with my language, but when I say we should stop giving aid to Israel, I mean, obviously military aid.
Well, that's historically what it has meant.
Yeah.
But now I feel
the main kind of aid that we should stop giving.
Now I feel like the ask needs to be, okay, well, if you actually believe it, then you need to say we should sanction Israel.
Right.
That's the thing. Okay. Okay. Not just we're not going to.
Or even like, I mean, I guess sanctions come with their own complications, but like minimally, I would be happy for the litmus test as a starting point, though obviously we should sanction Israel. But I feel like the litmus test could just be no aid, no military aid, no foreign aid,
Well, that's exactly what Netanyahu is saying we don't need anymore.
But I mean, you just said that you think that there would still be ways that there would be like military cooperation, intel sharing, and like
that's not necessarily military aid in terms of like dollars
but like,
given
is
to them.
Netanyahu actually saying we don't want weapons anymore? I feel like he's just saying that, but he definitely wants that.
It's not. No. It's not. We don't want weapons. Like they'll just use their own money, not American taxpayer money, to buy weapons from the U.S.
So you're saying that we don't trade with them with weapons, or we don't like even let them buy weapons? Yeah, of course, I agree.
We wouldn't be giving them foreign aid that they would then turn around and buy weapons with.
Then what are we saying that's different? I feel like we're saying the same thing.
I mean, yeah, I guess. So we can not give them foreign aid, and then they would still buy weapons, right?
So you're saying sanctions prevents them from buying weapons?
Sanctions would mean that no company can do business with them in U.S. dollars.
Yeah. I mean, that would be amazing, but I think even actually ending the foreign aid, because while Netanyahu has said, go ahead, do it, we still are giving. So even that would be like a step.
Yeah. I suppose. Yeah.
Let's dive in. I was going to do a really brief Islamic law primer. Do you think that would be helpful?
Yeah. So let me just introduce the subject. I was kind of reading a little bit about AI and Muslim AI, and I'm always interested to like pop in and see what academic papers have been coming out about Islamic jurisprudence and how Muslims and Muslim intellectuals and jurists are approaching AI.
Really? And you're kind of in the AI space. It's sort of cool to think about that intersection.
Yeah. I'm definitely not doing it in a Muslim way.
You're not doing it in a super bad way either. Let's not make it sound like you're not like working for a weapons manufacturer or anything.
So much that is not halal about it. But yeah.
God, don't say that. I think your company's not that bad.
No. I'm not saying, yeah. Totally.
And like your job is not that bad.
Totally. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. So I was interested in kind of reading, seeing what's going on, what people are thinking about. And I found the most recent thing that seems somewhat well thought out is a paper published June 12th by Yaqeen Institute. It's got a couple of authors on it.
One of which you know, right?
I don't know any of these authors. I will just say go look at some of the LinkedIn profiles of some of these authors and come to your own conclusions.
See where they've worked. Wait, but I want to give a quick primer before we jump into that.
Yeah. So anyway, so this is going to take us through like a framework for assessing AI, and they're going to think about it in terms of like how it comports with Islamic jurisprudence and that sort of framework. So why don't you tell us about the Muslim law?
Nice. Yeah. So I guess we can start a little bit with thinking about like what makes up Islamic law, and then we can just do a really brief overview of like the timeline of the discipline developing. So when we're talking about Islamic law, I feel like the most important thing I always tell students is there's no like one textbook. It's not like the Quran, right? Islamic law is...
Astaghfirullah. There's exactly one textbook, and it is the Quran.
That's the right answer if you're like a Salafi. I mean, right. Exactly. But the point is that like Islamic law is man-made, whereas the Quran is understood to be the direct word of God. So like Islamic law is the best that we can do here on earth. This is like a classical jurisprudential kind of framing to kind of get at, like, there is a perfect path, which is Sharia, and then fiqh or Islamic law is our best approximation with clear intent and like genuine intent to understand God's like plan of how we should do everything. So there's a couple sources for Islamic law. The first is the Quran. That's going to be the primary source, right? So anything that like is directly stated in the Quran is going to be a way that you're going to live your life. Now, I will say this kind of gives the impression of like not a lot of room for interpretation, but you'd be surprised. Because what one person sees as a very clear verse versus what someone else sees as more metaphorical, what one person thinks about as being a kind of specific injunction for one particular community at a moment in time that we're meant to draw a larger ethical principle from. There's a lot of room for interpretation, essentially, right? And arguments. And that's always been the case, really, since the Prophet's death. The Quran is not written by the Prophet, by the way. The Quran is the direct word of God. But, people understood the Quran with the Prophet's guidance in his lifetime. And then we've got hadith, which are sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad. And there are a couple of ways that you can evaluate those. And that kind of process of evaluation in many ways has been done for us. So you can kind of look at compilations of hadith that are strong. but they're kind of preserved through a chain of telephone. So and so and so heard so and so that heard the prophet say or do X. So a hadith is strong if the chain of transmission is strong. So if all those people actually could have connected with one another. It's strong if multiple people heard the prophet say something, and it's strong depending on the initial narrator. So, for example, that's where you get some differences between Shia and Sunni corpuses of hadith, depending on like who you think was a reliable narrator among the companions of the prophet. So we got Quran, we got hadith as kind of our text. And then the third and kind of really important for Islamic law, specifically tool, is ijtihad, which just means like independent reasoning. And so basically, when do you use independent reasoning? When something new arises, right? So a lot of stuff that hasn't changed, we don't really need new reasoning for, or jurists have already kind of come to conclusions that most people will accept because it's kind of become more or less a community consensus. But stuff like AI presents new ethical dilemmas, and that's when you kind of start to use ijtihad and kind of creative reasoning, but through the framework of Quran and Hadith. So that's a little bit about Islamic law. Anything to add there before I go with like a very brief overview of the timeline of the discipline?
Do you want to talk a little bit about historically how or what jurists have tried to balance as they come to decisions about Islamic jurisprudential matters?
Yeah, I think maybe let me know if this kind of timeline gets to that question. So the Prophet dies in 632 of the Common Era. And again, within the Prophet's lifetime, there are some things that he did you could kind of point to as early examples of law. But because the Prophet was the last messenger chosen by God, there just like wasn't a lot of need for like a formal legal system. It was also a fairly small community. So after the Prophet's death, we really start to get these questions of like, what does it look like to have like a legal discipline? And it's really during the Abbasid Empire, so like 750 to 1258. So really like a century after the Prophet's death and then centuries after that we actually get the development of like legal disciplines. You could say a little bit early, like the second Caliph, Omar, did some stuff to kind of start more formal law discipline, but really kind of like the main schools that all emerge in this Abbasid period. There's 4 main Sunni schools and 1 Shia school. And I feel like there's a lot of kind of desire from a contemporary perspective to kind of be like, this school is more liberal and this school is more conservative, but they really don't map that way. It's kind of more like how much they're willing to use ijtihad as a tool. That is kind of the difference between the schools. I would say that's like the simplest way I could put it, like how willing they are to use analogy and how much they think that things are evident in the text. And so you might say like, oh, that seems more conservative if you see everything in the text. But then on the other hand, if it's not in the text, maybe there doesn't have to be law about it. Maybe there's more room, right? And then the other thing I just kind of want to make a clear point about is that most Islamic law historically has actually been ritual law. And so if you have any familiarity with halakha or Jewish law, this is very similar. There's not really an equivalent for Christianity. And that's to say that it doesn't really make sense in our contemporary idea of nation state law. It's stuff about like how to pray properly, right? Like ethical comportment. It's really more of what we would today consider to be ethics. And things about like how to pray properly, how to do wudu properly. I mean, all these kind of little pieces of ritual life were never really litigated in court. They were just questions that pious Muslims had about how to live a just life. So Islamic law in the pre-modern includes both ritual and then it includes some things that we would consider to be law today, like marriage, like, financial transactions, that kind of thing. It's a system that also arose in a pre-nation state context. So thinking about it in the contemporary is really interesting because nation states are just such different beasts than empires. They're so much more centralized. They have so much more kind of power for control. So the idea of law is like very different than it would be for an empire where like things are just not going to be as evenly applied. And in some ways you have more room for like legal pluralism than you ironically do in a nation state. So yeah, there's no one pure Islamic law. And even today, if you hear people say like, well, Morocco is monarchy, like, okay, Morocco is monarchy plus a lot of French colonial law. Like it is not like just straight up monarchy. That doesn't exist. That's not a thing. And even if it was a thing, it wouldn't be monarchy in the pre-nation state sense of what it meant to be a monarchy court because there never was the kind of like power of technology of a centralized nation state. I mean, even like if you want to look at examples like the Taliban say they do shit in the name of Sharia law, like the Taliban also have a lot of local tribal laws that they treat as codified and Islamic. So yeah, I guess, sorry, there's a little bit long. One other thing I would say that's kind of interesting is a lot of Salafi movements today actually kind of have a lot of disdain for the classical legal system. And so they're not interested in these kind of main 5 schools. They're also Sunni, so they only would think of them as 4 main schools, but they kind of are like, to them, it's like the Quran is self-evident. Like, we don't actually need all these tools of analogy and interpretation. Like, I see the law in the Quran, it's like directly written there. But then I would say that I feel they're doing a lot of interpretive work, but they would say that they're not, that they're just kind of, it's almost sort of like a very like Protestant reformist kind of take on like, I can access the text for myself and I don't need the ulama. I don't need like centuries of intellectuals talking to each other to access what's around me. So a lot of diversity in these movements. But if there's one takeaway, is that there is no one Islamic law textbook. There's many different movements.
There might be differing opinions on this, but was there ever the intent that Sharia would be used to decide more secular matters?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really varies by empire. Asafar Qureshi Lands, who was my MSA faculty advisor and who's like a really cool professor of law at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She's both a constitutional lawyer and a scholar of Sharia. She argues that like there was always they didn't have this term for secular, but that it does in some ways really parallel our contemporary ideas of secular, in that many pre-modern Islamic nation states were really mostly concerned with Sharia when it came to the things that all empires and nation states are worried about, which is like taxes. Like, how do we collect money, right? And like things like marriage, which ultimately were mostly financial propositions at the time. But that often for kind of more civil matters, you could go to local courts. And in some empires, that might include like different schools of Islam, like different Islamic madhahib or like Islamic legal schools, or like Christians and Jews would go to their own courts, for examples. And then, of course, you do get some kind of tricky situations where, like, if you have like a Muslim man and a Christian wife, often, unfortunately, you're going to get dragged to the Islamic court, and that might be less favorable to you, because it's easy to idealize this and be like, well, minorities are treated so well, but like the truth is we live in a mixed society, and we always have, and people were not so clearly siloed. So it's not like the courts were always so just. But there is something kind of interesting there about legal pluralism that I just can't imagine in our present day nation state. The only example I could think of to tell my students was like in the US, you can choose if you are indigenous from like a federally recognized tribe to be tried in like a native court sometimes. And that's actually created some really interesting legal issues for people who get tried harsher and then are like, oh, I want to go back to the federal system, and that are not able to. But yeah, sorry, to answer your question, yes, I think that there was an idea sometimes. There also was a lot of doubt, and you kind of turned me on to this with Intisar Rab writes about this. There was a lot of the kind of harsher laws, like the hudud laws, for example, which are like what we might roughly think of as like, I think, criminal punishment, that they call it. Yeah. The stakes were very high. Yeah. And the fucking Taliban and ISIS are not like following these. Like, so for example.
No, there you very, very literal. Yeah. Like the,
but they're not even literal. That's the thing that's crazy. So like, for example, like the idea of like lashing if you commit zina or fornication outside of marriage. So this could be either cheating on your spouse or just having premarital sex. Like, you're supposed to have 4 witnesses, which kind of means you're like fucking in public. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing. It's like the punishment can be very severe, but then if you look at actual hadith about the application of the tests that determine whether or not someone is guilty of the crime they're accused of, the tests bear a high burden of proof for the accuser.
100%. And they seem to have been meant as a deterrent in a lot of cases.
And there are also punishments if the accuser fails to produce the right number of witnesses. And so there's like you were saying, there's a deterrent built into, making superfluous or false accusations or trying to really exact some sort of revenge on someone by using the legal system. However, even in cases where it seems like maybe the evidence does point to someone having committed a crime, if there is still doubt, the overall, and we'll talk about this in this, one of the core legal maxims of Islamic jurisprudence is to reduce harm. It's not, which I think is maybe in contrast. I don't know enough about the US legal system, and I don't know enough about any legal system. but it feels like the European, Western, and therefore US like law are kind of based on maximizing utility or justice, which can kind of lead to punishment. I feel like when we kind of have like a carceral state that sees justice as punishment and retribution, then maximizing justice doesn't sound so great.
Yeah. And I think I can't emphasize enough just like the kind of like police powers that nation states have, that like if you lived in like the Abbasid Empire and you were pretty far from Baghdad, like, and you were like a peasant, like how much did it matter that you were in the Abbasid Empire? Like it mattered when you paid your taxes, but like just like the ability to kind of like control citizens is so different in a nation state.
Mm-hmm.
And even the kind of feeling of belonging is a little bit different. Like, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So in one section of this, they talk about the objectives by which they evaluate AI. And so this gets into some of the legal maxims. And
wait, can you send me the article so I can see?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Someone didn't bring their material to class.
They did not. Thank you.
Okay, so the maqasid al-sharia, which is just like the objectives or the purpose of sharia, refers to the higher objectives and purposes that Islamic law seeks to achieve for humanity. Classical scholars identified 5 essential objectives that sharia aims to preserve: religion, deen, life, nafs, intellect, aql, lineage, nasl, and property, mal. These are not merely abstract concepts, but represent fundamental human interests that must be protected for both individual and societal well-being. Understanding these objectives provides the necessary evaluative framework for assessing AI applications. So, why is it important that we like take this approach or take an approach and coming up with a framework for like actually assessing AI and its fitness for like use more broadly? Is it that we're going to have like a fully Muslim society where people are only allowed to use it if it's like deemed halal? It's like, no. But it is interesting to think about the implications of if you were to implement this framework. Either how would you as a person use existing AI differently, or how could we reimagine building the models from the ground up? What does an AI model built in a completely halal fashion that avoids harming creators? It can't create any harmful content as it does today.
Can't harm the environment. I mean, that's huge.
It can't harm the environment. It can't, be obfuscatory or lie to you about what it's doing or what it's capable of. Or even like just thinking about the ownership structure of such a model, like who in that world would have the right to steward it and decide what goes in as inputs and what can come out as outputs.
I think you're right. Also, it's a very good test case for like, I think this is kind of thinking from the standpoint that we're in of being like Muslims in a minority context in the US, where like obviously, despite many conspiracies, and at one point I'll write about this, that there is a secret plot for Sharia. That is not the case. Like, I think really it makes sense to think about Islamic law as an ethical framework. It's precisely for these kind of issues. I think it makes a lot of sense. One other thing I can just say about the Maqasid movement, like I don't fully understand it. So like they are like the Yaqeen article is definitely correct that like Maqasid along with maslaha, which is like public interest or public good, these are principles that come from like classical jurisprudence. Like I believe Al-Ghazali wrote about, was like one of the first people to write about Maqasid, but the kind of formulaic way that I can't really tell if they're sort of like Salafi light. There's like a group of Islamic legal thinkers that really want to make Maqasid 2.0 happen. And I don't fully understand their politics. I've gone to like a few lectures at this like weird Islamic, it wasn't weird, it was a good experience. It's like Islamic summer camp that I did. And to me, the only thing I got really out of it is that they feel that every aspect of life should be viewed through like an Islamic prism. And I'm not sure if that's actually fully in line with like the classical jurisprudence of like the Abbasid era, but fair enough that that's kind of what they feel like what it should be used for. So just, yeah, a little side note, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so they say here scholars must master key legal maxims that guide decision making. The principle that preventing harm takes precedence over securing benefits proves particularly relevant for AI ethics. This means that if an AI application offers benefits but also poses significant risks of harm, Islamic law prioritizes preventing the harm, even if it means foregoing the benefits. For example, if an AI system could improve educational outcomes, but also risks exposing children to harmful content, the priority would be preventing the harm. I'll add another example in here, which I guess we kind of faced as a country more recently, is Anthropic had come out with this model that was briefly available, but then they pulled it back because they were like, oh my gosh, this is just too powerful. It's like so good. It's like you should be like terrified about it.
Yeah.
And one of the restrictions they had to put on it is that it can't answer questions about like human biology or biochemistry, because they are worried that someone may use it to develop some sort of bioweapon. But on the flip side, right, like people could also use it to, I don't know, try to create some new cancer drug or something like that, right? So there are clear benefits, but also like very big harms. And so what do
Also,
you
it's
do in
not
that
creating
case?
something from scratch, right? It's like a synthesis of all the information that we have put out into the world.
Well, it's generative AI. So when it is doing something, for example, if you're saying, hey, I don't know how to cure cancer, but like if you're just like, hey, look at these genes and like let's do some fucking math on them or something. I don't know if that's
I
how
have
you
a
cure
really
cancer.
basic question. Sorry,
Yeah.
finish.
But anyway, so it's generating based on the training data that it has, right? So that's the difference between that and something like, I don't know, like a machine learning or like an algorithm that
This
is
is going to
deciding
say,
based
is
on.
ChatGPT like generative or not really?
So they are generating content based on their training inputs. So they're generating like statistically likely outputs.
Interesting.
So this is actually like what is very, maybe one of the things that they talk about here is that there's an air of like deceitfulness in the way that AI has been released generally to the public. Um, in that what it's really like, people have this perception because the existing kind of frontier companies who are leading in AI want this perception that these models are like thinking,
Yeah.
feeling, reasoning
Yeah, there's very humanoid language used
things,
to describe
and that it's
them.
like a black box and there's like a brain inside of it. And what's really happening is that each of them have taken LLMs that were built by
Large language
public
models
public research, right? Or like public private research.
and publicly available data. Yeah.
So they take these LLMs and then they have their own training sets on top of them, as well as guidelines and rules and whatever, right? So they do some extra stuff on top of like those LLMs, which is not known. Like they add additional weights to the models and stuff like that that are, proprietary.
By weights, what does that mean?
You know what? I'm not really 100% sure, but like weights to
What information gets pulled
the
up? Maybe.
information,
Okay,
yeah, like
got it.
and the models themselves.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's beyond my comprehension. But so when you ask it a question, what it's doing is all of that data that it's been trained on is like been turned into like numbers, right? And when you ask it a question, like in those numbers, those are like graphed in like a 3D space. And when you ask it a question, it turns that into numbers. And then it tries to find where in that 3D space your question aligns with its training data, and then it's going to generate a response based on that. So on some level, it is still just kind of providing like a statistically likely output based on what you input. And there's not really any
thinking on a human kind of sense. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like it's not generating based on thinking. It's just like still limited by what it has been trained on. And that's why when it's inferring and it's trying to come up with new data, if you're just someone who's using it and you don't really know what you're doing, yeah, it can come up with something that sounds great, but it doesn't really think. And so it's just giving you what you want to
Can I
hear.
give a quick aside? This is super quick, but I really try not to use ChatGPT because I'm worried about the environmental impacts. But I will say I probably do use it like once every 2 weeks would be my guess, my current rate. But I usually try to turn to it for is to find like citations. Mm-hmm. And so one dumb example I had is I like had a quote from James Baldwin and I couldn't find the page number, and I was like looking through the book and I couldn't find it. And so I asked ChatGPT, I was just like, what page is this on? And it gave me a page and I went and it wasn't the right quote. It ended up being that I had the wrong book. And then it was like, you're right, sorry. It's like that idea, but not that quote. And I was like, what the fuck? That's not helpful. Mm-hmm. So you have to check. But then the second time that I did do it, I was like, basically like I sort of roughly knew a fact, but I needed a source for it. And it was like something that was sort of ancillary to my main topic. And so I don't have like, you know, anything I work on regularly, I have a pretty good like database in my head almost, and also through Zotero, which is like a citation management software that I use of like things I could check. But like if it's something that I don't work on, like so I was writing about the Fez, and so this required like an Ottoman history source. I don't work on the Ottoman Empire. And so yeah, I asked for a source and then I went and read the book, the section myself. I mean, that was incredibly helpful. It would have taken me a long time to like Google to find a precise source about like Fez's, the history of the Fez and the Ottoman Empire.
Totally.
So, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, yes, if you know what you're doing, and if the current like landscape of AI kind of demands that you have to be someone who is a critical thinker, or like you know what you're doing, or that you're not someone who doesn't fully understand like English or whatever, right? Like a lot of people can be misled for myriad reasons when it comes to using AI. But if you understand that you shouldn't really be using it to outsource your own thinking, but you can use it to take a few shortcuts, to automate some things, to make research easier, to make it easier to like pour through a bunch of different resources, bunch of different sources quickly.
But always go back and check and read the source yourself. Don't just cite.
Well, there are things you can do and rules you can put in place depending on how you use the AI, right? I think I've talked about this in previous episodes, but for a personal project where I'm kind of trying to synthesize a lot of different sources, I just created a notebook LM, which essentially you're creating like a mini little database and model that only looks at the sources that you upload.
And that's very foolproof because it's a closed circuit. Yeah.
It only answers according to those. And you can further put rules on top of that to say, if what I'm asking about doesn't actually exist in any of these sources, do not come up with a citation. Always cite directly from the text. Provide me a page number, and then it's on you to kind of go and make sure that you're checking on it.
Right, but this is an incredible level of precision that the average person is not going to
Right,
know.
right. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying is that right now, I think AI companies are happy to have this perception where you interface with like a chat or you talk to it, and it feels like a buddy and like someone who is thinking, and there's nothing in that interaction that kind of tells you, even like when you type something and you input and it's quote thinking about the response, Anthropic and I think both Anthropic and OpenAI, their little loading thing, it says thinking.
Oh yeah, that's
reasoning.
Kind of insidious. You're not really thinking.
Yeah. I mean, it's taking time. I mean, whatever. And some, not to get too semantic about it, maybe it is like in some way, but it's like, it's really just
No,
trying to
thinking
map.
requires experience.
It's trying to map your input
Yeah.
to what it knows in its set
Right,
of
which is
data.
not as like sweet and short of a thing to say. I just had a thought. I can't tell if it's woke or conservative. Like, could it potentially be like blasphemous to like talk too much to an AT? Like a, it's almost like you're imbuing it with a soul. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't think we're the ones who imbue things with souls.
Exactly. We shouldn't be.
Well, we're not.
But I mean, it could just start to be an idol. Like people think about it like a
I
friend.
mean, if you worship it, that's a different
but it's
thing.
not even worship. Like I mean, I think if you treat it like a sentient being, you know, it's not something that was like imbued with a soul by God. Like
yeah.
it could potentially be tricky.
I mean, maybe that's the same as talking to like an animal or a tree.
No, but those are things that were created by God. I mean,
so is all of humanity. But
but like animals have like, you know, experience
sure.
that's lived.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So do trees.
Yeah. So anyway, I think they're happy to have this perception that kind of leads people to think that it is thinking, and that can be a bit dangerous. And I think that
And what does
that's one of
Yaqeen
the
think
harms.
that we should do with that? Just be aware of that?
Well, again, it's like if you're thinking through this framework of reducing harm and also ensuring that there's, you know, no deception in the process of like rolling out AI broadly, I don't think we would have designed it that way. I don't think it would have been designed with the UI that it currently has, right? It'd be very different. To get back to the piece here, they have one section on considering context and reality, fiqh al-waki. So it means jurisprudence of reality and refers to the necessity of understanding the actual circumstances, capabilities, and impacts of what we're evaluating. So they're talking about who should be fit to evaluate AI. In the context of AI, scholars cannot issue meaningful guidance without understanding how AI actually works, its current capabilities.
That's a great thing. As I worry about even Congress people not knowing what the fuck they're talking about. Yeah.
Limitations, and its real world impacts on individuals and society. This condition requires engagement with empirical research and technical knowledge. For example, understanding that large language models like ChatGPT generate responses through statistical pattern matching, like we were just talking about, rather than true comprehension, is crucial for evaluating their use in religious contexts. Similarly, awareness of documented biases in AI training data directly impacts assessments of fairness and justice in AI applications. So it's not just like a technical assessment, but what would be required to really understand the ethics around AI necessitates cultural, economic, class understanding of this thing's impact more broadly, right? So
yeah, that's very thoughtful.
if there's a harm done by rolling out AI in such a way that companies start to fire a lot of people, then Islamic jurisprudence would guide people to say we should not roll out AI.
Or like, yeah, Islamic ethics for sure. Absolutely.
Or you'd have a concurrent rule that says you may not fire anyone or, you know, let go of employees for AI. All right. We don't have to, it's like a pretty long paper. We don't have to go through all of it, but there are just some things that I definitely wanted to highlight. And I think it brings up, like I said, a lot of interesting questions, because I started to ask, like, what would a halal AI look like from the ground up?
Yeah.
And it's just like impossible to imagine, because it would require such a different world.
This is the thing I also talk about with my students that I find so interesting when we think about like, oh, what are the things that, you know, people really ride hard for that they associate with Islamic law? And they're often things that we think of as being kind of like very like like having to do with the body or like having to do with a sense of like, you know, piety, which like totally makes sense. But like something that seems so freaking clear in the Quran is that like interest is bad. Like interest is like evil. And like, you know, I think I've said this on the podcast before, but I feel like it's still worth throwing out there in case everyone wants to pick it up. Like, where are like the people who are like just like extremely against like the inequity of like our global capitalist system? Like that like to me that seems like an obvious reading, right? But like what you kind of pull out and see. But all that to say that like, right, like if there was to be like a AI rollout that was compliant with Islamic ethics, we would live in such a different world. In the same way that like if we were able to like, you know, like if you and I were able to like get a mortgage or like have like our savings accounts through work not go to like probably really awful places. I mean, we could do more of this, but like it's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Like the world is not based on that ethical framework.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like this point they made here. This is it okay to jump down a little bit? We can jump back up for sure.
Sure.
This is under the kind of case study, and it's erosion. I have to say, this is actually a lot more.
The case study of issuing fatwas with AI.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. This is actually more well rolled out than I thought it would have been. Erosion of scholarly authority methodology. The Islamic scholarly tradition maintains quality through mechanisms of peer review. That's so true. That's so. I would never have thought of it that way, but they're really right. Scholarly credentials, ijaza, and the requirement for extensive study under qualified teachers. AI-generated fatwas bypass these crucial safeguards. The democratization of fatwa generation could lead to a situation where anyone can prompt an AI for religious rulings, potentially receiving responses that appear authoritative but lack proper scholarly grounding. But yeah, I think this is a huge issue, right? Like, I think that this already is a orientation towards knowledge that has been furthered by the internet. That has some positives in its democratization, and I'm going to sound like an elitist, but I think it has a lot of negatives in that it's kind of like, I see this with my students all the time. I love my students dearly. I'm not saying they're not critical thinkers, but they have this idea of like, they'll Google it and then they know. And it's like,
you got to move the mic closer to your mouth. There you go.
When I get excited, I wave around the mic. And it's even worse with ChatGPT because instead of getting multiple answers, you get one answer. And that kind of gives the impression that there's only one way of doing things, right?
And you have to know, I think an art that is lost, you have to know how to frame and ask a question.
Right, but also you have to know that there's rarely one answer to a question. That's
exactly.
That's like the next step. Yeah. Because like even like at one point this piece cited Ibn Taymiyyah, which is a little bit of like a neo-Salafi move. Though Ibn Taymiyyah is like more complicated a figure than I initially realized. He was like very anti like Sufi shrine veneration. He was very anti-Shia, but he was actually kind of Sufi in some of his own ways. But anyway, he's like someone that's cited a lot by like contemporary Wahhabis, and so has become kind of like elevated, even though he existed a long time ago. But even Ibn Taymiyyah, who's like a pretty conservative guy and who's someone that like a lot of contemporary Salafis will turn to be like, we don't need classical jurisprudence. Like Ibn Taymiyyah, I always teach this fatwa he had that I thought was so brilliant. He was asked like, if I follow like the Hanafi madhahib, can someone lead me in prayer who follows a different madhahib? And he was like, not only, like, these jurists were so funny in their writing. Obviously, I was reading in translation, but still, he's like, not only can you do that, but if someone told you otherwise, they wouldn't be a Muslim. Like, what a stupid question. Like, he understood that there was diversity, and he didn't think that that was, like, complicated. And I know I have students who think that if someone folds their hands differently, like, the prayer may not be valid. And this, like, conservative champion that, like, contemporary Salafis have built their, like, platforms off of really acknowledge like a diversity of practice and interpretation, as long as the jurists had sincere intent and were, you know, like not coming up with things that were like far beyond the pale of what the rest of the jurists were coming up with. So that kind of like diversity that is like really built into the tradition goes away when you have like a LLM, language learning model, LLM, just spitting out like one answer to you. Like, if you ask an LLM, like, how do I pray? It's not going to be like, it's probably just going to tell you one thing, right?
Yeah, well, we can try this in real time.
Like, yeah, I'm curious to see if it says, like, it depends on your legal school. It depends on, you know, the sect of Islam that you follow.
How
do Muslims pray?
Muslims
and like even within my lifetime, I think I've spoken about this before, but like algorithms have determined a lot of how we approach spirituality. Like I taught myself to pray using a YouTube video, right?
Muslims perform a structured ritual prayer called salah or salat, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Here's how it generally works. When Muslims pray 5 times a day at set periods tied to the sun's position.
Okay.
Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib,
Such
Isha.
an Egyptian accent on Fajr.
Before praying, Muslims perform wudu. Okay. All right.
You might have to prompt it to be more specific.
Meant to achieve physical and spiritual cleanliness before standing in prayer. If water isn't available, dry purification. Okay, can be used.
Sand. Yeah.
Direction, faced Qibla. Okay, it's got that. Structure of prayer. Each prayer consists of a set number of units called rak'ahs. The number varies by prayer. For example, Fajr has 2 rak'ahs, while Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha have 4. Okay, so sequence of movements: standing, qiyam, bowing, ruku', standing, again briefly, prostration, sujood, sitting briefly, second cycle.
So it's
repeats.
not getting more specific, I guess.
It's not saying like Shias pray like this,
Right?
and Sunnis pray like
or even
this,
more
and
like even within Sunnis, like where
within
do you
Sunni,
where do you fold your hands? Like, you know,
right.
Yeah. I mean, we
Are
could even
Shias
say
Muslim?
that's so rude. I was gonna say even the 5 times a day is a good general answer, but like, right, like Shias often pray 3 times a day. Like it is already losing some of that texture.
Oh yeah, yes, Shias are Muslims.
Good. Glad the algorithm is not anti. Though I saw elsewhere in the Yaqeen article, they do mention the possibility of there being, like, because of the aggregate of stuff, like anti-Muslim bias, which is definitely possible. Yeah. Yeah, and I really love this point that the Yaqeen article is making too, just that, like, part of spiritual insight and wisdom is having a teacher, right? That's a huge part of our tradition. Like the Prophet was an initial teacher. And then like there's so many Sufi traditions and even non-Sufi traditions of like learning from someone who has life experience and also has been authorized through a chain of transmission through a lineage of teachers.
Yeah.
And while it may seem more democratic to be like, I'll just learn it online, like I think something is lost in that kind of relationality of like passing through education.
Yeah,
Not that I have a teacher, so maybe I'm being a hypocrite, but I really want a teacher.
It's weird because you want jurisprudence to be this regimented, structured thing that provides some like semblance of justice, and so therefore can be applied like across a broad number of cases. And so therefore something like that resembles more of a science. But I guess there's more to it than it just being this legal science, because if you get an LLM to do that, then yeah, it's hard to, it's like an intangible thing, but I feel like culturally and intellectually things are lost. Even if you grant it's like, okay, yeah, they just came out with a new model that can actually think.
No, that's not a thing.
No, I know it's not a thing, but even if you were to have something like that, that could generate totally new ideas based on its training set, even then I'd be like, it feels dangerous to just outsource creating fatwas or
the act of dispensing
new frameworks.
Justice involves nuance, right? Like it involves thinking about like the particular circumstances of the people that are before you, but also involves thinking about precedent, it involves thinking about community dynamics. Like, it's just interesting to think about like how an automated model would weigh those different considerations. Mm-hmm. Also, the tradition does change with time, and people don't like to acknowledge this, but it's true. Like again, it's a human interpretation of a divine and sacred thing. So like, for example, like early Hanafis, it's easy to pick on them because they're really fond of analogies. So sometimes I kind of get with things that are a little more out there, but early Hanafis allowed for like some drinking of like one very particular wine. And then they kind of got bullied into dropping that position. Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, early Hanafis also were kind of debating and speculating whether it would be okay to pray in languages other than Arabic, which is, I won't get into that, but I really do think that there could be something there, but that's obviously not the mainstream position, and they also dropped that position, and so you have like scholarly community forming consensus over time, and that's also part of how we can say things, you know, like most Muslims believe you shouldn't drink, and it's like, okay, well, that was actually a process that happened, you know. It wasn't just like a one time decision based on the available evidence.
Also, I believe, I don't know, I believe that when you have these questions, you're supposed to ask them and then find an answer. You're not supposed to just be able to look in one thing or just like give an input and then immediately get something spit back out at you. You lose something when you're either not talking to someone or having to thumb through a book or read through an article or a couple different opinions to understand rulings or anything for that matter outside of Islam. And maybe there are some times when the point is to just get an answer as quickly as possible. But if you're really trying to go on some sort of intellectual or spiritual journey, having everything just ready, laid out for you, again, it doesn't feel all that transformative.
Right. It's a cliche for a reason that like learning is supposed to be difficult, right? Like
Yeah.
knowledge acquisition is supposed to take time.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I guess I will say, if I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit, though I feel split on this. Like the average person in the pre-modern was like not literate, right? And like for like a lot of time in history, you kind of would just go to like a sheikh, or like depending on maybe a Qadi or a judge, depending on what your issue was. So like you kind of were getting a spit out answer, and you didn't really get to do that work yourself of like consulting the text.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, yeah, I don't really know in what ways
But at
it's
least,
a reversion. In
You
what
know,
ways
when you give the input to the
new.
sheikh, you could see the person in front of you.
He's doing some thinking. Yeah.
He's doing some thinking, or like you can at least assess whether or not he's trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
He's not like in a black box,
Yeah.
you know, like the Christians do whenever they do the repentance or whatever.
I think that seems so sick. I would love to
You
just
don't
like
see the
confess
guy.
and just like,
They created their own little chat GPT guy.
yeah, that's true. But that's kind of like the
Also,
act
you-
of confession is
Yeah.
like what it's like an action, right? It's not
Yeah.
like, yeah, this is just, yeah.
You know, okay, the chat GPT, like that's what I had growing up with my parents. They were like, do this, don't do that, don't do that.
Right.
And it was just like my relationship with Islam was like not the least bit intellectual or deep or anything like that. And I feel like if you're just blindly following whatever something spits out, like, or if it starts to spit out fatwas, like that's just,
yeah,
I mean, I
that's
don't
a
know.
really
I
good
guess
analogy.
like, I guess maybe you could tell it that, hey, this is a fatwa that was generated. Maybe come up with some like nice reasoning that sounds nice. I want to get to their conclusions. Again, we're skipping through a lot of this just because we need to end the episode. But when it comes to guidelines for issuing Islamic rulings based on like AI, they have 5 guidelines. Or sorry, these are just like guidelines for rulings on AI generally, I think. So 1, prohibition on autonomous fatwa generation. While AI may be utilized to retrieve and transmit basic settled knowledge, it is not to be used to independently issue fatwas, synthesize novel legal reasoning, or apply general rules to specific personal
I
circumstances.
think that's really smart. That's kind of the equivalent of me saying like, you know, oh, I remember there's a hadith about this. Like, can you tell me like where to find it? Like, is it in Bukhari? Is it Muslim? Like, what's like, how do I find it? But it's basically saying like, if there's a new circumstance, it's not going to do the reasoning. I think that's smart.
Yeah, and the
It's like a
reasoning for
tool to
this,
navigate.
the kind of framework again, is the harms to religious authority, accuracy, spiritual guidance decisively outweigh any benefits of increased accessibility.
Very well put.
Number 2, permitted use as research assistance. AI may serve as a research tool for qualified scholars, helping to search through texts, compile relevant precedent, organize information. However, all analysis, reasoning, and conclusions must come from the human scholar. 3, educational applications with clear limitations. AI can assist in teaching establishing established rulings and basic Islamic principles, provided clear, prominent disclaimers indicate that this is educational material, not religious guidance. There's more to it, but I think you get the point there.
So an example of that could maybe be like for example, my pronunciation of shit is really, really atrocious. Like if I was like using AI to help me like correct my pronunciation or something like that.
There is actually, I have a subscription to an AI tool called, we'll do our first plug for, we're not getting paid for it. Tartil. It's a.
Why are we plugging it? We haven't used it.
I've used it.
Have you used it?
I use it to, I don't use it for pronunciation, but it does have a pronunciation thing in it. I use it to just read Quran and then to play it out loud.
Nice.
And it has both translation and transliteration as well.
That's a great example then of,
But it has like it is built for people who really want to like
work on their tajweed,
work on
basic
their tajweed.
pronunciation.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a feature that lets you read to it and it will use AI to correct your pronunciation.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Pay us. Institutional oversight requirements. Muslim organizations implementing any AI tools in religious contexts should establish committees of qualified scholars and technical experts to 1, evaluate the tools, 2, monitor ongoing performance, and identify biases, 3, ensure compliance with Islamic legal principles, and 4, review and approve any updates or modifications. Number 5, transparency and accountability. Any AI system used in an Islamic educational context must maintain transparency about 1, its limitations and lack of spiritual understanding, 2, the sources of its training data, 3, the process for reporting and correcting errors, and 4, the human scholars responsible for oversight.
I think that's really thoughtful.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like I do think this is like very well thought out, and at the very least, it should get people thinking about what is the purpose of this tool? How does it fit into my life? And like why don't we own this shit? You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. It very quickly illustrates how thinking about the permissibility or what would make one thing ethical quickly just touches everything else. And suddenly you're branched out into being like, we have to just remake this entire world.
Yeah, but I do think it can still be a good way for us to think about what we can control to get closer to that ideal. You know,
True.
like we'll never be perfect, but like maybe with time we could go through our 401ks and see what they're being invested in. You know, like there's stuff we could do.
Yeah. I don't think enough of my 401k is going to Israel.
You don't think so?
No.
Yeah, it should be more.
Yeah.
No. I also wanted to shout out that they do have a whole environmental stewardship section, which I think is really, really important. And that has been actually a really, in my understanding, really growing and generative part of both Islamic ethics and Islamic jurisprudence. And Agate has done some really cool work on this. There have been some really interesting fatwas coming out of Indonesia about like the environmental crisis as being a kind of like macro crisis of like humanity not being good like khalifas or like stewardship of like the land, which was like our God-given duty. And I mean, it really is like I think it should be framed as a spiritual issue. So yeah.
For sure. Last thing, I tried to search Halal AI after reading this, and it took me to a website, halalai.world.
Okay.
Halal AI is a leading-edge artificial intelligence and blockchain platform dedicated to advancing the global Islamic digital economy. The website looks like it was made in like 1999.
Someone was cutting edge.
But also there is a Halal AI, which is a scanner. You take a picture of your food and it tells you whether or not it's halal.
What is it like? Can it like...
It's definitely malware when you download it.
I was gonna say, like, but could it tell that it's pork any better than you could ask a waiter? Like, what?
See, this is the thing. It's like people just want the answer instead of just finding it for themselves.
Google is still an option. We don't have to AI everything.
There's a Halal AI that is an AI-powered parental control application that filters harmful content across platforms like Facebook, YouTube,
That's
TikTok,
getting weird. Okay.
Instagram. The question is, does it respect your privacy? I read another framework paper written. I think it was some Saudi scholars who were trying to think through AI, but it was too long ago to be relevant, really. But one of the key legal maxims that they said it violated, or that they weren't sure about, was the right to individual privacy.
Because why? Because once you put stuff in it, it owns that, or because like it took your knowledge without you knowing, like it's taken everything we produced.
Well, a lot, right? Like it does take stuff off the internet, uses it to like train.
Oh, this just reminds me. Did you toggle that thing on Instagram? I have to go back. Apparently, Instagram changed their settings, so it now has the right to use all of our images for like AI.
It's training, yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
I want stuff trained on my image.
You do?
Oh yeah.
Why?
I don't know. This would be cool. I'm not generating anything of any interest.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm just gonna generate a bunch of bullshit and make it worse. But the surahs and ayahs that they referenced as through inductive reasoning, implying that there is a right to individual privacy, seemed a little tenuous, to be quite honest. So I didn't include it. But that's something to consider. None of these halal AI companies are actually doing what I think of when I think of halal AI.
What do you think of?
I mean, you're starting from the ground up and saying, how do we get a data set that is not harmful to anyone, not extractive in any sort of harmful way, and then create the LLM from that, and then have a training process that isn't just we send a bunch of scraper bots out to all the websites in the fucking world and steal whatever we can. And then, thinking about the implications of a rollout. And again, who owns it? It shouldn't be privately owned.
Yeah, that is one thing that I appreciate about this article and about your conversation. Before we started this, I thought we were going to be kind of talking about like halal AI products, and I didn't really think about what would it mean to just have like a framework that was essentially halal. Like that's a very radical thought.
Yeah, and to kind of think about why it is important is, a lot of people missed having an evaluative framework for social media before it launched, and now we see the clear harms from it, and we're in another moment again in it, so it makes sense to
pause and think.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if all you can kind of control is yourself and your own circle of influence, that's still a start to be more thoughtful about how you engage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the kind of harm that potentially could be done. I still feel like I had to kind of come up with a better spiritually led guidance for how I use social media, honestly. That's another conversation.
Mm-hmm. I use it to tell women that they should be wearing hijab.
Oh, yeah.
So that's pretty good.
You're neglecting your own wife. I haven't heard that from you.
Well, I don't want my own wife wearing hijab.
Okay, just other women.
Yeah, other women.
That's reasonable. One thing I will say about Yaqeen itself as a source is that I do think it's gotten more interesting, and like this is actually I'm actually pretty impressed. Like I feel like this is very thoughtful and has like multiple perspectives and multiple authors. One thing that kind of worried me about Yaqeen when it first started, that kind of I think is in keeping with this larger theme, is that it was sort of like trying to infographic-asize Islam, so that it's like, oh, I have a question, I find it here as an American Muslim. This is an American Muslim website, by the way. And I worried about that because it was like, I worried that it wasn't going to be showing, like, again, the diversity of the tradition. But I do think that they have been, it still clearly has like a pretty like middle of the road Sunni perspective, but I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I do think it's cool that they're doing such like in-depth pieces, and I wouldn't have expected that for them when they first kind of came on the block.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Bye.
Bye.